I would just leave it as is, I think, at the moment.
Okay.
Okay, so welcome everybody, and thanks for coming along on wherever you might be. My name is Richard Twine. I'm co-director of the Centre for Human-Animal Studies at Edgehill University in England, and I guess it's the norm for lots of platitudes to come out of people's mouths at this point, but I really want to sort of convey to everybody that I'm really excited about this seminar. I was reading Greta Gaard's work 30 years ago in the 1990s as a student, and really was influenced by it, and my encounter with ecofeminism was life-changing. So I'm so pleased that Greta will be giving a talk to us in a moment. So Greta Gaard is Emeritus Professor of English and Women, Gender, Sexuality Studies at the University of Wisconsin, River Falls. And her teaching and research explore conceptual and narrative intersections across fields of feminist animal studies, climate justice, and queer ecologies. Greta is the author or editor of over 100 articles and 7 books of eco-criticism and eco-feminist praxis. And Greta has produced a monograph on critical ecofeminism, 2017, a special issue on coronavirus and climate change in Bifrost Online, 2020, and a co-edited volume on contemplative practices and anti-oppressive pedagogies for higher education in 2022. And you may well also know her volume from 1993 called Ecofeminism, Women, Animals, and Nature. So I'd really love to now hand over to Greta. I'm really interested to hear your talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Okay, I'm going to start the full PowerPoint. Let's see, slideshow, play from start. Okay, can you see the title slide?
Yes.
Can you see the cameo?
Yes.
Fabulous. Okay. Thank you. All right, here goes. I think it's about a 50-minute presentation, but now we've already lost a few here. So I'll do my best. Okay. All right. This talk comes from a recurring nightmare that I had since childhood. I grew up in the San Fernando Valley of Los Angeles, and this nightmare came to me when I was very young, and it was a cow on a hill grazing. The hill was fairly barren. It was just a sort of a mound, and she was looking at me and chewing. And behind her was an oil rig, many oil rigs. But the specific oil rig behind her was pumping oil through her neck, and it went into the ground and pulled up oil. And this nightmare would recur for a few nights, and then it would go away, and then I would have it again. And this past spring, I was invited to speak for a California Institute of the Arts, and really sort of rummage through my brain to see, well, what's left, you know, because I've done a lot of speaking and such. And this dream came back to me, and it's like, oh, this is perfect for an arts group, right? Because it's so right brain. I don't have an idea to begin with. What I have is a nightmare. And so I started pursuing it, and that's what this is. Oops, am I still sharing? I hope so. Okay.
Yes, you are.
Okay, super. So I'm going to minimize the Chrome. All right, let's see. How do I change screens now? Escape, forward. Let's see.
Maybe just the arrow keys on your keyboard.
Got it.
Yeah, you got it.
Thank you. Okay, so lactation is a feminist issue. Obviously, art was also a feminist issue, risky and rebellious. So lactation, as you know, can be chosen work if mothers willingly nurse their own child or voluntarily share the milk It can be a work of generosity or it can be stolen. In the history of the United States, as in the exploitation of enslaved Black women forced to breastfeed the master's children while their own children are fed a nutritionally deficient gruel, it is stolen work. And so what we see is that milk is stolen across differences of race, species, economics, and enslavement. And in looking for images for this slide, there are hundreds of images of Black women holding white children. It speaks for itself, I would say. So I want to argue that lactation is biowealth, and it can be stolen. It is certainly a work of affection and attachment, but it becomes unpaid slavery. So I wanted to distinguish between the structures of oppression and the objects of oppression. That this structure is not necessarily shaping the who is in there, but it shapes their relationships. So we're looking at many political and philosophical and ecological arguments against working less dominant others to death while promising their survival. But these arguments are not profitable. So we're looking at profits. And I want you to think about why it's okay to work subordinated others to death. In the United States, the Food and Drug Administration approved recombinant bovine growth hormone on November 5th, 1993. They used Monsanto's BST called Posilac, and it's the first chemical that made milk the first genetically engineered food in the United States. So the editorial that I wrote, Milking Mother Nature, I submitted to the ecologist immediately, and they waited a flippin' year to publish it. I'm not sure why. I wrote them and asked, but got nothing. So here we are. So why did the FDA approve recombinant bovine growth hormone? Because animals are machines. We know this one. A cow's normal lifespan of 20 to 25 years is cut to 5 when she is used for industrial dairy production. Her calves are taken away from her within 24 hours after birth. As you know, the males are confined in wooden crates for about 15 weeks. Their bodies are sold for veal. The females are fed a nutrient-dense milk replacement in order to grow so that they can replace their mothers. In today's dairy industry, cows overproduce milk by force. In 1930, the average cow in the US produced 12 pounds of milk per day for an annual 4,380 pounds. In 2024, the average milk production per cow was about 2,000 gallons per day, I think, or per month, for a total of 16,657 gallons. 20% of hamburger comes from, quote, spent dairy cows who are no longer producing milk. And as the animal science writers about this say, quote, the primary purpose of a dairy cow is to produce milk. And when I read that, I just stopped and thought, what does a cow think about her so-called primary purpose? And how would she picture it? What are her desires and goals? What does that question mean for her? So despite the ads from the American Dairy Council, we know that the majority of world's populations lose the enzyme to digest sugar in milk by the age 4. And this includes almost everyone except Euro-Americans. Advocates of BGH claim that it will solve world hunger, but again, the targets where people are suffering food scarcity, people generally can't digest the milk. 70% of people worldwide cannot digest cow's milk because of lactose intolerance. We already have an aggregate surplus of milk and butter in the US. And we know that the causes of world hunger are poverty, climate change, war, food waste, and gender inequalities. We've lost a lot of small farmers as corporate agribusiness expands. And in agribusiness, the herds in 1993 of cows numbered between 5,000 to 10,000 cows already. Consumers initially rejected the recombinant bovine growth hormone, and this forced the U.S. to export the milk. So we have issues of technology and motherhood. Underlying the view of recombinant bovine growth hormone and other forms of biotechnology is that the view that science has to improve on nature and that nature can and must be controlled. So it's not surprising that cow's milk is one of the first instances of technological intervention, because the cow in the US and elsewhere symbolizes like maternal and natural. So there have been a number of coalitions against oppression, notably small farmers and environmentalists, as well as feminists. In Duluth, which is where I was teaching at the time, the Lake Superior Greens organized, and we created these little butter containers and went into the grocery stores and took their butter and folded it into these Land of Fakes. So Land of Lakes is a Minnesota industry. And we folded it into these butter holders when it became available. All right. No one was arrested. So we've got this picture looking at these connections of milk and oil. So first, I'm going to look at the history in California of milk. Cattle entered California with the Spanish missionaries. Oops, gotta say this. California is the 7th largest producer of crude oil in the United States. That's pretty hard. There's 50 states in the US. California is the 7th largest. And since 1993, California has been the largest dairy producer in the nation. 95% of the nation's production comes from these large dairies, which have at least 1,000 or more cows in them. So the hunch that I had as a child, which would be like 1960, 1963, 1965, has expanded. I won't blame myself for single-handedly not writing this article, but I don't think capitalism could be stopped by one child. Okay, so here we are. The Spanish missionaries came and brought cattle for their fat, skin, and milk. The Russians on the Sonoma coast, so Sonoma is in Northern California. It's near San Francisco, if you have a mental map of California. And then they shipped the butter and cheese to Alaskan trappers of wildlife. So you've got this multi-species and multi-geographic oppression of other animals other than humans through milk. In 1860, there were 264,000 people in California and 104,000 cows. So half the population, really. The dairying regions were San Francisco Bay and Sacramento Valley at that time, Northern California. Okay, and this clipping is from the Los Angeles Herald. But the milk moved south. So Chino is a area, the San Bernardino Valley is east of Los Angeles, but it's still part of the so-called greater Los Angeles area. And so Chino took over being the lead. Initially, they were producing sugar beets, but the dairies created more profit. And the LA dairies moved out of Los Angeles because of the price there to Chino, because the land was more affordable. By the 1960s, there were 170 dairies built. This is when I was dreaming. In the 70s, there were 350 dairies, but 300,000 cows. And here's that clipping from 1922 discussing how Chino is moving into the milk production. I reached out to Winona Howder. This is the beauty of knowing activists over the decades. We hadn't talked in easily 10 years. And I emailed her and said, I'm doing this work and I see that you're doing work in California. She wrote me right back. It was like, oh yeah, I remember you. Here's the material you want. So she runs Food and Water Watch. So here, what we see is that there are 1.7 million cows on these mega dairies. And each mega dairy has 2,300 animals in average. The mega dairies produce 9.2 billion pounds of manure, 4 times the waste of Los Angeles. It's enough to fill Olympic-sized swimming pools. Before there were methane digesters, the untreated manure is stored in liquid lagoons, releasing methane, ammonia, nitrous oxides, or it was spread on farmland. Yum, right? Because that goes into food. The San Joaquin Valley, which is this central valley you see that's in the darkest color where it says extreme outlier, has 90% of the dairy cows in California. No surprise that it has a high ratio of Latinx residents in comparison to the statewide population. So what we have is farm workers sort of changing what the work is, but still coming up, starting to families and living in the area. The residents in the communities of these mega dairies smell the manure daily. There's a lot of flies because of the manure, and the families tend to stay indoors with windows closed. Most people live in trailer parks because of the high cost of housing in California, and their water is groundwater. I guess I'll get to that, which is probably not filtered. So here are the 68.3 billion pounds of manure annually. These tarps are covering and capturing methane from these pools of cow manure. So dairy contributes to air and water degradation and pollution, obviously. The odors are horrific. The people in the towns are choking on the smell. The climate impacts, of course, there's methane. There are not always methane digesters. 10% of the US methane emissions come from manure, cow manure. And with more ammonia, there's more nitric oxide, there's more water pollution. I won't check that leadership council. So the number of dairy farms with manure biodigesters from 2020 to 2024 has expanded enormously. California made the decision to value the manure biogas and try to capture it. And this is what the biodigesters are doing. And now the agribusiness people are arguing that dairy is good because they have the manure biodigesters, right? So where are they in the United States? More than 350 farms have built or are building biodigesters. But look at the intensity in California. So California is the state on the lower left side of this map. And there's an intensity of manure biodigesters in the Central Valley of California, more than almost anywhere else. Even Wisconsin, if you look at, so Wisconsin is, how can I explain this? If you look at the Great Lakes, they look like this. Wisconsin is the state right below the Great Lakes. Okay. So last year there was a big influx of avian flu, and that's when I was looking at a lot of this. It affected dairy cows and poultry in the Central Valley. The cows become ill, the veterinarians can't handle it, and then their bodies are just dumped. They're dumped along the roads for trucks to pick up. They're dumped in these piles. And, you know, I just always try to juxtapose working girls, girls, whether, you know, in the US or in other countries, that it's girls. It's a feminist issue, that they've been forcibly inseminated, given birth, had their offspring taken away, and then their milk is being taken, and they're jailed basically for the majority of their lives. Okay. So the California dairies were told to expect a 2% mortality for H5N1 bird flu, but 10 to 15% of the cows were dying. It affected 50 to 60% of animals in the herds. In the Central Valley, this is the hottest part of California. It's away from the oceans, so it's sort of cornered between the coastal mountain range and the high Sierras. It's this dip in the center, and there's not a lot of air movement, so the temperatures are suffocating. Even barn cats that drank the milk died from the milk. We also have the Latino workers in Central Valley, but the wastewater monitoring sites don't cover the areas where the most human cases of the virus are. They cover the more affluent cities. The dairy workers can't and don't report being sick because they could lose their jobs. They can't lose the income. Even cats in Los Angeles contacted the flu through packaged milk. And bird flu was found in rats in Riverside County. So air quality. Air quality in Central Valley dairies in California is the worst in the nation. So here you see again the map of the San Joaquin Valley. You can see the High Sierras, Yosemite, Sierra, Sequoia National Park. And then on the left near the ocean, you see San Luis Obispo, Santa Maria. You see the mountain range. It says coastal range. So really, this is the dip in between these areas. The Central Valley bears the brunt of the dairy industry. The groundwater is contaminated with high levels of nitrates from the manure and wastewater. Groundwater is the primary source of drinking water. There are no restrictions placed on the dairy industry's degradation of water and air quality. Thank you, Winona. And there are more disadvantaged communities and people of color reliant on the groundwater for drinking. So, of course, there are the Latino farm workers who are not doing dairy, they're doing crops. But there's also, I pulled this out, ordinary working class white people, too. There's Latinos organizing to ban the pesticides and insecticides that are used on the crops because they don't stay on crops. They migrate and affect children. So the image on the right side here is a single mother who's living in a trailer park and using groundwater because she can't afford bottled water. And you see on the bottom here, the Fountain Trailer Park arsenic level in the water is above 80%. And North Edwards, which is the middle and upper class, more affluent residence for largely white people, this is their arsenic level. So something is diverting water. Something is in place to treat water, and it's not being offered equally in a democracy. Again, Food and Water Watch, thank you, Winona, for these images. Cow's milk has a bigger environmental footprint than plant-based milk, as you can see across the top line, in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, eutrophication and water pollution, land use, and even the use of fresh water. It's a much higher environmental footprint. And here's Winona. She says, we need to stop believing that we can only do what is politically possible, and we have to fight for the vision of the kind of world that we want. This is after more than 30 years of direct action, organizing with communities and writing. She's still on her game. Love this woman. So let's see. She says we need to ban new mega dairies, and there needs to be a moratorium on new oil and gas operations. We need to transition to renewable energy, and we need to define all water as a public trust and not as a commodity that can be used for resource extraction. Okay, so I put this picture in here because I just stopped when I saw this picture, and it's the little girl in the middle who's looking directly at the camera, although they all are, but she's so small and her udders are tied up in this milking machine. And when I looked at her, she said, what aren't you asking? What aren't you asking about milk? So I'm keeping it. So here's what the dairy industry doesn't want us to ask. Why and when do cows have milk? What happens to their calves? Do the mothers notice? Absolutely. We know the documentation on this, the grief, the calling for the cows, from the cows to their infants. Is it ethical or just profitable to keep using a female for reproduction and never allowing her to keep her offspring? And when the cows can't conceive or lactate anymore, what happens in their so-called retirement? Okay, on to the oil portion. Um, so of the top 5 crude oil producing countries globally, the US produces 14.7% of global oil. Saudi Arabia produces 13.2, Russia produces 12.7, Canada 5.6, and Iraq 5.5. Do the math. So we're thinking about the Middle East, or propaganda is having us look at the Middle East as producing oil. So California, as I said earlier, is the 7th largest producer of crude oil in the US annually, producing between 100,000 and 500,000 barrels of crude oil annually. So how did we get here? This is a slide of the La Brea tar pits. Every child that grows up in Los Angeles is taken to the La Brea tar pits for a tour. It's a school tour, it's their family taking you there. I'm not sure why this is a thing. They want us to see the place where prehistoric animals got stuck and drowned and died, and one indigenous woman. Perhaps we're congratulating ourselves on our good fortune by distancing ourselves from nature or from gendered others. We're told as children that the tar pits happened too long ago for us to really care about it. Everything's handled now. What we didn't learn, at least in the 1960s, was that the indigenous people of California were quite numerous. The Tongva people of the Channel Islands, the Chumash people living along the coast of where I went to college, Malibu, and here in downtown Los Angeles, which is where the tar pits were, the indigenous people used the asphalt from the tar pits to caulk their canoes and used it as waterproofing for their baskets. Okay, so here we are, Father Pedro Font, in California's history of settler colonialism. He says about the indigenous people, they are so savage, wild, and dirty, disheveled, ugly, small, timid, that only because they have the human form is it possible to believe that they belong to mankind. During the mission period, which was 1769 to 1834, the Indian population at the missions declined from 72,000 to 18,000. Births fell, deaths exceeded births. So the death rate within the missions was that of the worst slave plantations. So in the US, we need to rethink history, that the Southeast, where the slave plantations were, needs to be paralleled with what was happening with indigenous people in California. That's a big reframe for people who grew up in the US. According to the History Project at UC Davis, some mission Indians sought to escape the system by fleeing the Padres, and a few Indians openly revolted and killed the missionaries. Good job. I found an art exhibition from the Autry, and it's online if any of you want to use this in teaching materials or class discussion. And you'd have to flip the slide. But what it says is Franciscan showers. So the parallel is being made here between the Nazis and the Padres, the Catholic missions. I think it's pretty powerful. Okay. Here's another example where they pulled out newspaper reports and the sections that were redacted that remove the evidence of racial violence. This is called Another Dead Indian, that people don't seem to ask, oh, why are Native people by the highways? Why are Native people lying around drunk? So the newspaper clipping inspired this painting about internalized trauma and cycles of violence that plague indigenous communities. And the ambiguous police presence evokes racial profiling by the law enforcement. Okay. Helena Maria Viramonte's book, Under the Feet of Jesus, looks at the farm workers in Central California, and a lot of people have used that book for years, largely because it's both so precise and it's also readable. We've been able to use it in freshman composition. And this excerpt is Estrella, the protagonist, the 14-year-old farm worker protagonist. She's lying under the car with Alejo, and it's teen romance. And it says she remembered the tar pits, energy money, the fossilized bones of energy matter, how bones made oil and oil made gasoline. The oil was made from their bones. This, what would you call it? Transcorporeality, in Stacy's words, the way that matter migrates, and the meaning of colonization is passed on from one material substance to another. So here we are looking at Los Angeles and oil capital. This is the Los Angeles City oil field, which is right near downtown Los Angeles. It's still an arc right there at the turn of the century. You see houses and you see these oil rigs right around them. There's a road of muck that is unpaved, of course, and it's from the water used in the oil. Okay, so people moved to Los Angeles to try and strike it rich. Between 1920 and 1930, the population in Los Angeles more than doubled, from less than 600,000 to more than 1.2 million. Oil was an important factor beyond the petroleum itself. And the oil boom in Los Angeles coincided with the real estate boom. But there are other kinds of booms, like the explosions from the oil rigs. The technology wasn't there to detect and prevent the increased pressure in these oil rigs. And so in the Los Angeles Times, there's a huge archive that I drew from to get these images. This is the Signal Hills oil field. So Signal Hills is by Long Beach. There's a number of like smaller communities in Los Angeles. Long Beach is to the south in 1937. And what you notice about the Signal Hills oil field is how many cars and such are there and how close by the residential areas are. It gets better. Another view from Signal Hills. They thought it was so lovely, it was colorized and used as a postcard. Oil wells. When oil was found in Venice, California, the oil wells were built on people's properties and all the way up to the beach. And so I'm using Venice Beach as an example of what happened to so many other communities. So Venice began in 1905 as a speculative real estate fantasy, and developers built canals and put gondolas on the canals. The canals are still there. Venice Beach was a place that I used to go roller skating as a teenager. Lots of people went roller skating. You've probably seen the pictures of like the weightlifting area, and now there's a big skateboard park, and it's just a very popular area for outdoor markets as well as pot, drugs. Everything happens in Venice. Okay. In 1926, Los Angeles annexed Venice, and in 1929, the Ohio Oil Company found oil southeast of Venice. But the Los Angeles zoning prohibited oil drilling in residential and commercial sections. That ended. Greed. By March of 1930, the Santa Monica City Council was granting permits to property owners and oil prospectors because they saw any delay would reduce their profits. Initially, 5,000 Venice residents demanded an end to drilling and signed a petition, took it to the county. But the landowners had specific rights. So here's the problem with private property, as any eco-anarchist knows. The landowners said that what happened on their land was their business, and the fact that the emissions, the air quality, and the drilling, because when the drilling went down various levels, it could cause shaking across the block, and there were booms. So the effects of the drilling did not stay on the property. So a coalition formed to protect real estate from drilling. They tried to ban all of the wells. What happened in Venice was they called it town lot fields, that the oil derricks were erected on the town lot. So here is an oil derrick right next to the people's home. And they were going to make money from that derrick. What can I say here? During the 1930s, the Depression, Venice property values fell, but the costs rose because with the oil comes crime. So there was more policing needed. With the oil comes fires. So there was more fire department needing. With the oil comes home damage as the explosions shake the frames. So there was more infrastructure repairs. And by 1932, the oil wells had depleted the underground gas pressure that was needed to extract more oil. Other communities had been watching Venice, and some promoted oil drilling, and others said, we're absolutely not going to have it. Here we are, the Beverly Hillbillies. I don't know if this is something that you guys know or not. I wonder if I can play the song.
Come and listen to my story about a man named Jed. A poor mountaineer barely kept his family fed. And then one day he was shooting at some food, and up through the ground come a bubbling crude oil, that is, black gold, Texas tea. Well, the first thing you know, old Jed's a millionaire. The kinfolk said, Jed, move away from there. Said, California is the place you ought to be. So they loaded up the truck and they moved to Beverly Hills, that is, swimming pools, movie stars. The Beverly Hillbillies.
Okay. So I confess I watched this show as a child. Most kids did. But the myth that's happening here is that oil is in Oklahoma and Texas. We never dreamed that oil was right there in Los Angeles, that it was an oil field, that there were fields all across Southern California. Why was this such a secret? A part of history that was hidden. So World War II oil production. Let me move on to that. Up there. Okay. After the December 7th attack on Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, oil was linked with the war effort. And so we had to keep drilling oil in Los Angeles. 9 more exploratory oil wells were built in residential areas, in Elysian Park, in Wilmington, which is where I used to go dancing as a teenager. And you drive past these oil refineries that are flaring at 2 a.m. And it seriously looked like hell. It looked like a kind of hell to drive past them. And we didn't really think, oh, what am I breathing? How is this affecting my breathing? How is it affecting the environment? These weren't questions people asked in 1970, just beginning to ask those questions. So when the companies voluntarily adopted oil conservation measures, like adapting the noise, the fire reduction technologies, the public stopped demanding public action and legislative action. The oil industry transformed Los Angeles from an agricultural to a largely industrial economy. The African-American community felt these changes, especially because oil drilling was less restricted in poor communities and communities of color. There's been a lot of work done on fossil fuel racism. Energy research and social science argues that the public health hazards from air and water pollution and the risks associated with climate change fall disproportionately on Black, Brown, Indigenous, and poor communities. These are called sacrifice zones, not sacrifice people, but that's what it is. Okay, so this is Island White of the Thumbs Islands that go along Long Beach's coastline. And the reason that they're there is because they were constructed, they're not a real island, and there's 4 of them. They were constructed to house oil rigs. But the people of Long Beach said, we don't want to look out our patios or cafe dining spots and see oil rigs in the ocean. And so the oil company said, we understand. And they built these islands and put palm trees on them to mask the fact of what was going on. And so this huge tower has several oil rigs in it, as do the other shorter towers. They've been named for the astronauts, each island named in honor of an American astronaut who lost their lives in the service of NASA. So now I want to go downtown. In the Beverly Hills Beverly Center, which I remember being so excited when it was built in 2008, everyone was so excited. It'll be like the greatest shopping place ever. The shape was designed to accommodate drilling. Inside the Beverly Center, there are 160 retailers, including Gucci, Louis Vuitton, and Burberry, and the pumping operations are hidden behind a wall between Macy's and Bloomingdale's. Here is the Hewlett-Packard oil site. This was built in 1967. It looks like an office building. It's along Pico in the Mid-Wilshire neighborhood, and there are 52 oil rigs here in this oil well. They move along a derrick across the tracks and can access any of the wells in operation. This is Cardiff Tower. Also on Pico Boulevard, it has 40 active wells in the Beverly Hills oil field, conveniently across the street from Union 76. Occidental Petroleum designed this site as a synagogue. So this is what synagogues in Los Angeles can look like, so that it would fit in because the neighborhood is historically Jewish. So now this is home to 40 wells that are accessed by a movable derrick. And here's Beverly Hills High School's Tower of Hope. Where's my book? Okay. This Tower of Hope is a camouflaged oil derrick beside the athletic fields and the buildings of Beverly Hills High School. So this is possibly the most shocking information, I guess, that I found in this research. So on the grounds of what became Beverly Hills High School, the first oil wells were drilled in 1906. They predated the school by 20 years. Those under the school's football field, which you see here, were abandoned and capped. In the 1950s, 2 pump jacks began near the girls' athletic field, which is just across from 20th Century Fox, the movie mogul, and another 25 oil wells abandoned by Chevron in the 1990s. The ground underneath the science building was a sump for oil waste. You can probably imagine the health effects. In the early 1980s, Beverly Hills High School permitted the drilling of 17 new wells. And the city changed its municipal code so that oil drilling was prohibited everywhere in Beverly Hills except at the high school. The city and the schools were promised 5% of the royalties. And Beverly Hills High School received about $300,000 a year. Some sources say it was $700,000 in royalties, courtesy of the hundreds of barrels of crude oil. And the funds were used to pay 85% of the teachers' salaries and keep the school running. Okay. So this is Beverly Hills High School's Tower of Hope. This houses an oil derrick, an oil rig, beside the athletic fields and the buildings. And what can I say? The Tower of Hope was portrayed as an act of philanthropy. And insiders called it the Tower of Hope you don't get cancer. Poisons from this oil rig would cause a whole generation of students to become ill and die. And so let's see if my next slide says this. Yes, okay. So this is Joy Horowitz. So I was so shocked. I tracked down her book, which was remaindered at a thrift shop. Right. So this book, Parts Per Million, The Poisoning of Beverly Hills High School, was published in 2007. Joy graduated from Beverly Hills High School in 1971. And when she went to her summer reunion in 2002, she found that most of her classmates had died from cancers. Some of them had multiple cancers. And she said, when you're a person in your 40s, that is too young. The following February of 2003, Erin Brockovich got involved and a deeper reality was exposed. Have you noticed that the Erin Brockovich films, that at least the ones I know of, have not covered oil in Beverly Hills? So what happened at the beginning in this lawsuit, the number of people with cancer grew. There were 28 graduates with cancer in the beginning, but this became over 1,000 plaintiffs, 400 with active cancer. Yet the community said that the emissions were inconsequential. There were 3 epidemiological studies documenting cancer cases for Beverly Hills High School. The LA Cancer Registry found 3-fold excesses of thyroid cancer for young men living adjacent to Beverly Hills High School. Excess rates of cancer among graduates from Beverly Hills High School, 3 times the background rate for Hodgkin's disease, twice the expected amount of thyroid cancer, elevated rates of testicular cancer. In November 2006, the judge dismissed the plaintiffs' cases. And in the end, the lawyers for the oil companies challenged the evidence and demanded higher levels of certainty. So what was being proven was a 94% certainty rate. They demanded a 95% certainty rate. And as Joy Horowitz said, as a society, we're waiting for proof of harm rather than insisting on proof of safety. So a decade later, Beverly Hills High School, this is 2018, started the oil well remediation project. And by November 2020, after spending $40 million, the final oil well was capped. So this, what can I say? This really, reading this, it brings to mind, how do we think about environmental justice? Because the founding claim of environmental justice is that hazardous production and toxic waste sites are most often located in low-income communities and communities of color. This is still true. Beverly Hills High School is the outlier. But what explains the family's willingness to not have to pay tuition for a public high school and to get that tuition through active oil drilling where their children were going to school? I'll leave that for our discussion. Let's see. So here are some commonplace images of oil in Los Angeles. And when I did this paper, I recognized these images, okay? And so there's some complexity of complicity in that we're all driving in Los Angeles and we're all seeing this and we're seeing not seeing this. So here's an oil well and pumping near junked hearses. I mean, the irony is so big, isn't it? Pump jacks operating on an on-ramp in freeways, of course. Steel derricks on the hillside in Brea Canyon. Oil wells pumping next to a cemetery again. And this one just, the oil well and the hearse, it's like, yeah. A father and baby with the oil rigs. So here is the Los Angeles oil field. So if you're looking right here, this is like Dodger Stadium area. It says Stadium Way. This is downtown Los Angeles where it says 2nd, 4th, 5th, Wilshire. This is downtown Los Angeles. So the oil wells right close to downtown Los Angeles. Here are the oil fields in Los Angeles. There's a strip by Palos Verdes. Here's Long Beach, Compton, Hawthorne, Inglewood, Culver City, Wilshire Boulevard. Here's the Beverly Hills oil field. The downtown Los Angeles oil field, the Whittier oil field. We didn't know any of this when I was growing up. I didn't hear about any of this. There are 11 refineries that produce 90% of California's gasoline and diesel. California produces oil for much of the nation, not Oklahoma, not Texas. So here they are. 4 are in San Francisco, 1 is in Bakersfield, and 4 are in Los Angeles. 3 of them in Wilmington. And again, this is where I went to gay bars and stayed out dancing until 3 or 4 in the morning. Wilmington, seeing the flares throughout the night. So here is, to circle back and tie these two parts of the talk together, here's the map of California's disadvantaged communities, the farm workers. The cows, the dairies. And here is the map of California oil and gas fields. And I really want you to see that this is what the cow was telling me in 1960 when she came to me in the dreams, is that it's the same place. And the structure of oppression is operating in both of these areas. So here they are. So what can I say here? In terms of metric tons of methane, if California cattle were an oil or gas basin, they are second in line to the Permian Basin of West Texas and New Mexico in terms of oil and gas production. You see it goes farther down. I'm looking at the Alberta tar sands emitting 100,000 metric tons of methane, and California cattle emitting 768,000. So what are we doing about it? New York is ahead of California, although California has the largest number of oil wells and the largest number of dairies. California plans to phase out oil extraction by the year 2045. I will be 85 if I'm alive that year. So my entire life and the lives of so many has been during this huge period of oil production. Hundreds of thousands of people have had their health affected, the land, the animals, the air, all of it. And that's when they're going to phase it out. I pause to think about Martin Luther King's struggles. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And we know through painful experience that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. So here's the review. We have this history of colonialism, extractivism, racism, gendered speciesism, the females, classism, the working class people working in these dairies, breathing that air, and these intersectional racisms and sexism producing a multi-species kind of abuse of mothers and offspring. And what these really are transfers of wealth. That is, wealth is extracted from life, and transfers of energy. And they're also transfers of self-determination. That is, all of those confined to produce milk and suffer the sighting of oil production don't have that self-determination. So as I ended this talk one night, so many nights, I got up at 2 or 3 in the morning and came down to the dining room table to write, so many nights, because this was such a right brain project. The questions were so right brain. And I pulled out Adrienne Rich's on lies, secrets, and silence. And she says about lies, the liar lives in fear of losing control. They cannot even desire a relationship without manipulation, since to be vulnerable to another living being means the loss of control. And I thought about, what are these lies? She says lying is done with words and also with silence. And the silences of what was not out in the open about milk and about oil. I want to break with this talk, which I hope will go somewhere in print. And then I pulled out Audre Lorde's Sister Outsider in her famous essay, Poetry, by which I mean art, dance, writing, music. Poetry is the way we help give name to the nameless so it can be thought. This is what she wrote at the end of her essay, Poetry is not a luxury. So There we are. Thank you for listening. Let's see, I don't know how to stop sharing now. Let's see. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Greta. You can always leave the slide on the screen if you want.
Oh, I think I got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Quit. Okay. Let's see. Are you still there?
I'm here, yeah.
Okay. There we are. Okay. So
Okay.
I'm happy to discuss it, but I feel like I've discussed it to death. So I'd love to hear from you guys.
Sure. Well, I will open the floor to anybody who would like to ask a question or make a point. I personally found that really fascinating, and a lot of that history was quite new to me. I've never been to California in my life, so it was really educational and really insightful for me. But I'll let others come in. So you can just unmute yourself, I think. Or you can type in the chat if you like, or there's also a Q&A box, which you should be able to see on the top of your screen. You could also use that as well if you want.
And you guys, I'm really looking for where to send this, where people would actually publish it. Because it feels so controversial and so anti-corporate that, like, how am I going to get it in print?
Hi, it's Helen. Helen's my colleague at Edgell. Helen's a criminologist.
So you could, thank you so much for your talk, Greta. It was fascinating and illuminating, and I feel even more depressed about the state of the world in terms of environmental harm than I did before, but that's good because I know about it now. But obviously all of what you say is of interest to myself, and I'll definitely tell my colleagues here who are also critical criminologists, so we're interested in harms as well as things that are strictly, shall we say, criminal. I actually think criminology journals would be really interested in your work.
Really?
Yes, and I would say probably the one I was thinking of is critical criminology, would be in particular interested. There's also, I can't remember them offhand, but I'm pretty sure there might be journals to do with eco harms and such like as well in the field. But it's, how can I put it? There are many different schools of criminology, but certainly the school of criminology that my team subscribe to definitely fits what you do, and would appreciate your work very much and your insights.
Look at it. Thank you.
I love the fact that I think did you mention Jackie Stacey at one point and her work?
I didn't. So tell me about that. How do you spell
It was a Stacey that you mentioned, I think, but I didn't know whether it was Jackie Stacey.
Possibly
Stacey Alamo, yeah.
Aha, okay. Okay, that sorts that. It's just that's a way back when reference for me. But I did want to say, so I know us academics always do, my current work relates to what you're doing, but I was hooked right from the start because you started talking about the FDA and about the reasons why they approved the bovine growth hormone. And my mind immediately flicked to my research. So I'm currently trying to write a book about gendered pharmaceutical harms. So about devices and drugs which mainly seem to harm women because they're in most contact with these things, as it were. And a lot of the time it does tend to be, not exclusively, but it does tend to be women from particular communities that are affected by these things. So I guess from reading all I have about the FDA and how it operates, you didn't surprise me at all in the slightest, because it seems to be, I mean, we've got the Medicines Health and Regulatory Authority, and we've got NICE, which is the National Institute for Clinical Excellence, I think. And although they have, how can I put it, funding from pharmaceutical companies, and there is quite a bit of influence, I don't think it's anywhere near as much as in America and with the FDA. And it seems to be, the critical stuff I've read is like the FDA often rubber stamp things, but America has to be really thankful for the FDA because of Kelsey kind of not rubber stamping thalidomide back in the day as well. So, but I think, yeah, it kind of rang really true with what I've been reading about as well. And also the links, sorry, I'm going on a bit, the links to non-human animal harms and to certain communities. And I completely agree with you, because that's what I'm finding the more I research, that there is that link. And yet again, there's a link, as you say, to oppression going on, which very much is in the ballpark of feminists' interest, that most of my colleagues are on the team as well. So thank you so much. It was illuminating, it was fascinating, and please do send stuff to criminology journals. We'd love it.
Okay, thank you. Again, the thing that I just couldn't grapple with as a mother myself was, why would you trade your child's health for money? I mean, I just can't get there.
But I guess it's not, sorry, I guess it's not their child.
Well, it is in Beverly Hills, it was their child. And they didn't have to pay tuition for Beverly Hills High School, a public high school.
Yeah, you're right. That's hard to get your head around.
Oil was next to the football field and next to the girls' softball field. Yeah. Okay. So I see other people wanted to speak.
I know we have a couple of questions in the chat, but I think I'll stick with the people who are putting their hands up first, and then I'll come to the people in the chat afterwards. So I think Felicity was next, and I'm just going to do that kind of context. Felicity is a new PhD student at CfHAS, so I'll just added that in. Over to you, Felicity, if you can unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you so much. Apologies, I'm losing my voice a little bit. Oh, sorry, I was joined twice. I'm calling from Brazil, where I am at COP30 at the moment. So I'm sure you can understand where my question's going to be. We have had news that there are over 300 industrial agricultural lobbyists here, with around 100 from the meat and dairy feed corporations specifically, as well as the soy barons. Obviously, that is extremely disappointing, but not necessarily unexpected, as we know that there's a lot of greenwashing that happens within these climate conferences, and it's increasing year on year. I'm obviously in the animal rights world and an animal advocate, so it's been extremely difficult to see how much there has been in terms of dairy companies like Danone and Nestle, and even Arla. Yesterday I was at a plant-based diet talk in the Denmark pavilion, and it was sponsored by Arla, which is a massive milk corporation, and I just couldn't get my head around that. But I want to know really about the form of reproductive violence, not just against cows, but also against reproductive labor of humans also. Meeting with Indigenous communities here who are losing their homes and their rightful territories because of the agriculture business. In fact, yesterday I even met with one leader who his brother was killed recently on Sunday in a fight in their territories because of the agriculture business. So it's extremely real and present at the moment. And I want to know how you feel about this being co-opted by climate policy, and how climate activism and animal activism can really challenge the reproductive capitalism nexus in these spaces where it's not prioritized, and definitely not at the forefront of conversations in a way that it should be, given that it is such a leading issue. That's just my first question. I also had another question where I was curious to know, sorry, but you don't have to answer this one now. I'd be happy to follow up. I was curious if you were interested in other areas of food exploitation. I'm from Cornwall in the UK, and so a key area is dairy, but we also have fishing. And I found the links between dairy and oil that you were showing in your talk very similar to fishing and plastic pollution, and how humans are slowly being poisoned by the toxicity of plastics as well, as the impact that creates on animals. So just something else that it kind of created thoughts in my mind. But thank you for a fascinating talk. It was really, really amazing.
Thank you. Let's see. So the thing you wanted me to address is this reproductive violence and how climate policy is co-opting reproductive violence. This seems to be the singular mindset versus what is a more liberatory, eco-feminist, green, call it what you will, mindset, which would be an intersectional mindset, that they're trying to replace one thing with another. Everybody wants to know that there's just one problem and it's not cancer, which is everywhere. But the problem is it is cancer. It is everywhere. And so that's too much. That's a hard sell. What is that motto you hear in activist communities? It's not climate change, it's everything change. And just simplifying it down to, if we just do this one thing, well, then of course people feel better, because then when they do the one thing, then they're done. Then you can't ask them about the other 10,000 things. So it's really astute that you have pinpointed that. And I wonder, back to you, how you are putting that on a poster or a sign or something, how you are messaging that back at them, that it's not one thing, it's the linkages of all these things. I don't have an answer for it, but maybe you do.
Oh, just to quickly reply, I definitely face the same issues. So I'm here in the environmental space. I'm here with a group of young people who are taking part in the negotiations, and a lot of them would consider themselves environmentalists. So even just starting at that level of conversations about maybe the ethics in which they're living, in which they're still participating in exploitative industries and practices, that's already at such a low-lying level. And I see what's so key here is education and awareness. But then at the higher level, there's the silencing that you were talking about, where they're very aware of what they're doing and they know the impact that it's having, and they don't want to make people aware of it. Yeah. So you find yourself sort of stuck in a binary zone of, well, some people aren't aware and some people are very aware, and either way, there's a silence.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you both. Coincidentally, another one of our centre's PhD students has their hand raised. In fact, Cameron, you might have your hand raised twice, according to, but over to you, Cameron, if you can unmute yourself and yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for a really fascinating talk and all your work, which has also been a real inspiration to me, like Richard mentioned. And I guess, yeah, my kind of quick question was, I found that when you were talking about the way in which, the oil rigs were kind of hidden, and all the creative ways that was done, that was really fascinating. So I guess I wondered whether, to what extent a similar thing happens with these dairy mega farms, and whether you found ways in which they're hidden creatively. And I was also interested in why you think it is there's such a focus on hiding it, where I've also seen that, I don't know, in other parts of the US, there's almost this fetishization of oil and fossil fuels, and making that almost part of their personality and culture. So I wondered so that basically those two parts of the question.
Yeah, so I first of all, I just love this Q&A, because you guys are like kind of fishing in a brain that's full, and so it's like, oh yeah, I have an answer for that. But I forgot about it, and so California sees itself as the primary environmental state in the United States. Okay, Earth Day started in California when there was that oil spill in Santa Barbara. Now let's, pedal back on Santa Barbara. White, upper class, clean, all their toxic waste goes elsewhere. Clean. And these people, white upper class people and white students, were seeing animals coming in oil soaked. And it was horrifying, and the animals died, and there was nothing they could do. There was no fix. There was no workaround. Here it was, death, you. And so that kind of changed. California still has, and presently perhaps the unearned status of being, a very environmental state. And maybe it is earned. I don't live there anymore. I live in Minnesota. I'm a refugee. And Minnesota has its own problems too, with the dairying industry and such. But in the Twin Cities, there's a very progressive activist community that, what can I say? It has that split of the urban-rural that so many states do in the U.S., of where the activism is and then where the profit is. So why is dairy hidden? When you saw the map of the Central Valley, so you see that geographically it was the perfect place to hide something in plain sight. So there's these two mountain ranges. And what I didn't map on there, which led you to ask this question, are the freeways. So in California, we live on the freeway. People, if you ever read Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower, people walk on the freeways. The freeways are literally the blood arteries of the state. And so Highway 101 goes along the Pacific coast. So you have the coastal mountain range. If you're driving from LA to San Francisco, you pick 101 because it's beautiful and it's faster. And then between the two mountain ranges is Interstate 5. And 5 goes right through the Central Valley. And when I was a kid driving to San Francisco to go dancing, Victoria, thank you for coming. Thank you for saying goodbye. I would drive the Central Valley because you could pull off and connect with the farm workers who were there selling like cherries or, yummy kinds of fruits, and buy directly from them. And they got to keep that profit. That was what little we knew in those days. So what can I say? Is dairy hidden? It is hidden in California in the Central Valley because people don't drive there. But I work in Wisconsin, or just retired from working in Wisconsin, and Wisconsin is known for its dairy farms. And so I had the majority of students were dairy farmers. Check that out. And there's this state fair thing every year of Princess K and the Milky Way. And these are the beautiful girls who are, milk fed. So they're a bit larger than many girls. And because milk is, to fatten up calves, right? So she was Princess K of the Milky Way. It's the annual honor given to a dairying daughter. And her job is to go around the state and promote the dairy industry. And she was in my second year composition class. And she was smart. And I was, happy to see her and to put this part of her in a, mental, okay, I'm going to treat her this way as my student. And she came up to me about a week after class started and said, I have to withdraw from your class. And I said, why? And she said, well, I've learned that you don't like dairy. Word is out. Oh, really? And I said, but I like you. Okay, I like you. Why can we work together on this? And she's like, absolutely not. She was adamant. So what can I say? When you look to the left, shall we say we're sort of politically left, or some of us in some big, larger, there's a lot of, it's almost like being in a Jewish community, that there's a lot of debate, about, well, I think this, but I sort of think that, and what do you think? And people are constantly talking to each other about it. There's a lot of ideas sparking, but on the more conservative side, there's a right way, and there's not debate. It's very hard to debate that way. And she couldn't see it. She felt that if she stayed in my class, she would be betraying her family. So I don't know how I got on this, is how dairy is hidden, but certainly isn't hidden in Wisconsin, in the dairying states of the US. do you have dairying areas in England? You do. Yeah. And so the culture must be quite different in those areas.
I mean, I think there's definitely a big divide between like the town and the countryside. And so I think, yeah, it would just be like I guess the Lake District, near where I am in Lancaster. It's a bit of a dairy area, and but I don't think there are any sort of towns which would be identified as sort of. I think it's a kind of in England there's quite a rural urban divide on these things. But yeah, and then there are other parts of the country which are definitely like sort of pig producing and chicken, industrial chicken farming and this kind of stuff. Yeah.
Cameron, did your question get addressed enough?
Yeah, and just to add to what Richard's saying, yes, definitely. I mean, I grew up in the countryside, probably in like Herefordshire. I think the biggest thing there is it's like the industrial chicken farms, and we've got like rivers like the River Wye, which is now like an ecological complete dead zone more or less, because of the from the chickens. And I think that was like an interesting one because it was a switch from battery chickens to free range chickens that caused this ecological problem, because it was all the chickens then went outside, and it was the the runoff from the chicken manure which was causing the pollution. So that was I just find that quite interesting what you were talking about, these connections, and it was initially done as kind of this ethical move, even though it's obviously we can question the ethics of free range chickens, but then it created this ecological disaster, which has obviously then had an impact on the local communities. And similar thing where it's rural areas that often aren't don't have a lot of political weight perhaps, and influence.
I think I'll just quickly go to the chat because there were a couple of at least a couple of questions. So Isabel was saying that she'd been to LA and didn't know there were so many hiding oil wells, and asked the question, do you know if this is a uniquely American problem, or do other countries have similar practices of hiding oil wells? I was also surprised by that.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Isabel. I have really had my hands full just looking at my hometown in Los Angeles, and the kind of shock and betrayal that one feels with one's hometown, because movie stars and fashion and music and dance, and then my stepfather told me that the nation's porn capital is in the town right next to our home. What? Right? Van Nuys is the porn capital of the United States. I did not know that. Child porn. So all these things are hidden in plain sight, aren't they? And we somehow focus based on our own race, class, comfort, privilege. We focus, we foreground and background. And Plumwood's, idea about backgrounding and the master model. I feel complicit over and over. How did I not see that? I'm socialized to background it. That's how. Yeah.
Thanks. There's also a question from Liam, who's another CfHAS PhD student, and he says he's writing about ecofeminism with a socialist framing. He says, I'd love to know if you think the concept of biowealth applies to a male character stealing eggs from a bird's nest for his own sadistic amusement. One of the novels I will study is Anne Bronte's Agnes Grey, where human-animal violence is a key theme, so it's massively relevant.
Sounds like a win to me. How about you, Richard?
Yeah, I can't speak to Bronte's literature, but yeah, I mean, I think, like biowealth, and then there's, I guess, similar concepts, aren't there, that have been developed in the literature on genetics and but biovalue, thinking of work by people like Sarah Franklin and Melinda Cooper, who've written on similar themes, which would be worth engaging with. Yeah. Couple of people just saying thank you, and then Helen's Helen's the message to Felicity and everyone. You might find academic literature on agnotology and the manufacture of ignorance by those in power. Or there's also something called ignorant studies, isn't there? Who know what is going on and mechanisms they use to keep this from most other people. Yeah.
Ignorance studies. I love it.
Yeah, yeah. I only found out
who
about
started
this.
that?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's worth having a little Google on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Suppose I think we might get cut off soon. I'm not sure. I'm a little bit worried about that. But I suppose I wanted to ask a question possibly about the limits of thinking in a kind of multi-species way within feminism. And so like some feminists won't want to go to that kind of thinking around females of other species, and that's like a step too far, because I guess their feminism is through a humanistic kind of lens, and it's something I wrote a bit about previously in 2010, my paper on intersectional disgust, which was basically inspired by encountering a disgust reaction from a feminist colleague at that time who saw me carrying the book Animals and Women, which is the co-edited book by Carol J. Adams and Josephine Donovan. And yeah, so what do you think is the solution to broadening feminist concern beyond the human, I guess would be my question.
Right. Well, we've spent our lives trying to do that, haven't we? I mean, you know, having just retired, it's like a retrospective moment. Like, what happened in the 1980s? I found a Viva Cantor's article, "The Club, the Yoke, the Leash," and it was published in a journal of radical Jewish feminism, I think. And I was like, thank God, here it is. And I photocopied it and I distributed it to everybody at the Center for Advanced Feminist Studies. And then I waited and nothing happened. No one replied. No one replied. And it was like, I thought feminism was interested in oppression. I thought feminism was interested in a more intersectional, I know that was just starting in the 80s, but you know, making these connections. And what happened? What happened here? And I guess, you know, is it 45 years later that I'm still wondering what happened? What happened to feminism? And I think white middle-class straight women just feel so put upon. They just have my heart's sympathy. Middle-class, wealthy, white straight women, because it's just all too much, I guess. The various, when you start peeling back the labels to see the various ways that oppression functions in Euro-Western capitalist societies, everything is up for sale. But, yeah, I mean, I don't want to end on a cynical tone, but yeah.
Yeah, I know you're having that discussion earlier about possible places to publish this work. And just to add to what Helen was saying, like I'm sure there must be green criminology journals which kind of combine critical criminology with green criminology. I'm sure they must exist. It's not exactly, it's not my field, but I'd be surprised if they don't exist. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just trying to find a link for one. I'll just bob the critical crim one in. Yeah, there's definitely other journals. I mean, there's corporate crime journals that I was thinking of, for corporate criminology journals that would fit as well.
Okay. And Richard, you know, do you think that the Down Under environmental humanities, is it worth it? Or Deborah Bird wrote, is gone? Some of the founders are gone. what do you think? Is it even worth trying them? Because I mean, they do have like an international distribution in terms of the environmental humanities.
Environmental humanities is such a curiosity, isn't it? It's almost like a safe space that people go to when they don't want to think too critically. Sorry, that's that's another cynical take, but certainly on the tends to be a field in it which is not open to thinking critically about human-animal relations in any great detail. And I may be doing some people an injustice by, you know, by saying that, and maybe I just don't know the people that are more open. But yeah, I mean, I think you'd, and again, you could say the same for environmental sociology. It's very, it's not gotten over its own anthropocentrism. So I think that always makes the process of finding a suitable place to get published on these sorts of issues quite precarious, doesn't it? And I think it's whether I always face the decision: do I try to get something in an animal critical friendly journal, or do I try to get something placed in a more mainstream academic journal, which is maybe harder to get published in, but has that value of getting the word out to beyond your own silo. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you know, we publish it just anywhere and then post it on academia and then just say, have at it, you know, take it for free. Yeah, but an initial good placement would be really nice on this. Yeah. Well, thank you all. I do see we're past time. I don't know when this thing is going to just shut us off, and I don't want to end that way.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to do that. It was just a concern of mine that because I've never used Teams before. It was always Zoom, but it seemed to work okay in the end. So thank you, Greta, and thank you to everybody who was in the audience, and thanks Jessica, Jamie, Michelle. And hopefully we'll be able to get this talk up on the CfHAS YouTube channel at some point.
Send me a link so I can somehow publicize that. Wonderful.
Sure. Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
I'll say goodbye now.